These are my two main string libraries, Cinematic Studio Strings and Spitfire's BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro, which I've blended together in this short piece. In this video, I'm going to show you how I achieved this sound. Before I do though, I've discovered that most of you who watch these videos have not yet subscribed. If you enjoy these videos, I'd really appreciate it if you would be able to subscribe. It'd really help me out. So the first thing to say is that I have none of my processing on whatsoever on any of the buses, any of the channels. I have absolutely no reverbs turned on at all. So this is purely just the sound of Cinematic Studio Strings in combination with BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro. So let's just start with what I've got on the go here. So here is just the Cinematic Studio String sound, and what I'm using for them is only the spot mics. So on Violin 1, I'm using spot mic 1, and on Violin 1B, I'm using spot mic 2, so they've got a subtle difference in them. I'm not using any of the main or the room in either of them, so I'm really just getting the close sound of Cinematic Studio Strings. So I'm getting that really direct sound, which I'm wanting to make broader. The reason for this is that Cinematic Studio Strings is an absolutely fantastic sound, but it's not the perhaps broadest sound. And so I'm experimenting by adding more of a larger room, such as Maida Vale, where BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro was recorded, to this library, and seeing how we can kind of have the best of both worlds. So my approach to adding to the sound of Cinematic Studio Strings is actually going into the microphone positions of BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro. And of course you can get a lot of control with this. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've only selected a certain number of microphones. And you'll notice that these are the microphones which capture the room sound of Maida Vale rather than the close microphones which capture the kind of the instrument sound. So really what I'm doing is I'm trying to kind of superimpose Cinematic Studio Strings close sound into Maida Vale, into this larger space. So if I just start playing, this is the BBC Symphony Orchestra Violin 1s. So you can hear that it's a much more distant and kind of roomy sound, I guess. It's almost like a sort of fake reverb almost. So a little bit of outrigger, slightly more of the ambient mic, full sides, and a bit of the balcony. And then what I did was just kind of put them together. And I started with the channel fader completely down on BBC SO Pro. So we're just starting with the pure Cinematic Studio sound. And I just blend it into taste. And I kind of settled round about here, I think. If we just hear BBC on its own, then add CSS to it. What I really like about it is that it has very kind of broad room sound, but it has that real kind of sense of directionality coming from CSS. So it has a lot of detail, but also sounds like it's in quite a big room. So what I did is I saved this mic preset. Go up here, you can just give it a name. So I just, and then hit save. And then anytime you open up the Spitfire interface, you can press this little button here. You have all your different presets available. And I just saved mine as blend with CSS. Click that, load, and all these different microphones come in. So we can have a consistent room sound. What I've also done is I've turned them up to 11 or 400%, because this signal, if it was just at 100, is really quite quiet. So we want to turn the volume up to 400 in each of these. So if we go to Violin II, and here it's a similar kind of idea. So here's just the CSS on their own. Really nice directional sound. Then I've copied in and done the same thing with the BBC here. So you can see it's got very similar microphone positions. This is the BBC on its own, which I think is a gorgeous sound. I would totally use this on its own. And CSS for a bit of detail. And again, I'm just using the spot mics, which have panned slightly differently to each other as well. So I'm going to go through and do the same to the violas and the cellos and the basses. So exactly the same thing that I've done here, kind of copy and pasting in the mic positions. So I've copied all the MIDI in. So we're going to turn off the main mic and I'll leave the spot mics, but I just like everything to go back down to 0 just so I can have quite a bit of control. And we're going to kind of put these a little bit more to the center, so around about 11 or so. So that's Viola A, CSS. Viola B, we'll do the same thing. We'll turn off the room, the main, we'll leave spot on, and we'll go into BBC SO. Click mic positions. There's a little button here. Blend with CSS, load. So I'm just going to do the same thing that I was doing before. In the mixer, turned Viola BBC SO all the way down. I'm going to start playing and just mix it into taste. Okay, sounds all right. I would probably EQ it a little bit, get rid of some of the mids. Okay, cellos, let's move on. And do the same thing. Okay, and basses time. We'll do the same again. Okay, so I've gone through, changed the mic positions in Contact for CSS for the basses, put in the same mic positions for the basses in BBC, and again, we're just going to mix into taste. Well, that's a tremendous bass sound, isn't it? What a great combination. So again, I haven't done any sort of processing at all. There's nothing being added whatsoever. Let's just hear what this little demo sounds like. So I'm quite happy with the sound of that. But what if I want to make changes to it later on? There's an easy way of doing this, and it's using VCAs. VCAs are really useful tools to use because it means that we can change the level of a group of instruments without actually changing their mix. And this is really useful when we're blending instruments together in this way. So I'm going to show you how to set that up now. So if we go to View, the first thing we need to do is check Channel Strip Components and check that VCA is ticked. It may not be by default. So it's View, Channel Strip Components, and VCA. And now we're going to go through and select all the CSS instruments. So these are all the close mic instruments. So that's all the A's and B's selected. Then we're going to go to the VCA row, and in this little grey box, we can click there, and we're going to create a new VCA for selected channel strips. So we click there. And now if we go to the far right hand side of the mixer, this massive template, you see we've got VCA 2. Now I'm just going to call this CSS strings. Now if I solo this and start pressing play, all you can hear are the CSS Cinematic Studio strings parts alone. And if I unsolo it, the BBC gets added. So what we're going to do is add another VCA for the BBC. So it's the same process, going through, selecting all the BBC channels, grey box, create a new VCA, far right hand side, we have VCA created here. I'm going to call it BBC SO strings. And now if I press solo, guess what? We can just hear that beautiful roomy sound of the BBC SO. And if I unsolo it, we've got everything. So this now means that I can go through, and maybe I decided that I listened to it the next day and there's too much solo strings. Well, I can easily go through and change that mix. So I can make them much louder or much less in the mix if I want a roomier mix. So this is now affecting, just with one fader, all the instances of Cinematic Studio strings. Or similarly, you might want it to be not as BBC SO heavy, so I can bring that down. So this is a particularly useful way of rejigging your mix once you've got it. So VCAs are really useful. That was a really quick look at how I layer and blend my two main string libraries that I'm using just now. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know below. I'd be very happy to get back to you. Also, please give us a like, a subscribe would be fantastic. More videos like this coming up in the future. See you next time. Take care.